The arrival of a new kid into a family's life is typically a momentous occasion, but this particular family is about to face problems that they cannot discuss with anyone, not even their doctor. Unfortunately, the protagonist can't keep the secret for very long. Somewhere in France, Katie, a young mother, arrives at the local police station, desperate to find her missing spouse. It has been an entire week of tireless searching. She explains that they both work at the same factory, but no one has seen him there either. All attempts to reach him have been futile, leaving her with only a faint lead that her Spanish partner may have returned to his homeland. Curiously, she hasn't yet lodged a missing person report, attributing it to the overwhelming challenges she currently faces as a sole caretaker of 2 children. Katie seeks guidance on the possibility of temporarily placing her youngest son under guardianship until the situation stabilizes. The incessant cries of the baby have drained her of all her energy. The officer is taken aback by her response and makes an effort to dissuade her by pointing out the potential difficulties involved. Let's go back in time a couple of months. Lisa, a young girl, wakes her mother up in the morning, and while her mother struggles to get out of bed, Lisa makes breakfast for herself. Katie rides her motorcycle to drop off her kid at school before starting her day at the cosmetics factory. The work weeks run together like clockwork. When a new employee wins Katie's heart, though, things begin to shift. During her lunch breaks, she keeps a close eye on the man and, per usual, goes outside to smoke. It's in one of these situations that Katie finally meets the unknown man, who introduces himself as Paco. Immediately, the couple found themselves drawn to each other without much thought. Paco and Katie engaged in an intimate encounter in the restroom. The next day, Paco waited for Katie outside the factory. At the end of her workday, she explained that what had happened between them was a mistake. In the evening, Katie put her daughter to bed and told her that she would be dining at a restaurant with friends. In reality, she had a date with Paco. During their dinner, she discussed Lisa with her new lover and learned that he had no children and had only been briefly married in his youth. The couple had a wonderful evening that continued at Katie's place. Meanwhile, Lisa woke up and overheard something happening outside her room, but she didn't dare venture out to investigate. The following morning, the little girl entered the kitchen and witnessed her mother and an unfamiliar man sharing a pleasant breakfast in their pajamas. Lisa was frightened and quickly sought refuge in her room. Katie explained to Lisa that Paco would likely be living with them soon, so she would need to adjust to his presence. From then on, Lisa started taking the bus to school, with Paco riding his motorcycle behind Katie. A few months later, Paco received a call from the factory director, informing him that Katie was in the hospital. She had given birth to a baby boy, and Lisa chose the name Ricky for her new sibling. Once again, the little girl's life was disrupted. Her stepfather transformed her room into a nursery, and all the attention shifted to the baby. Paco did his best to establish a connection with Lisa, but she still struggled to accept him. A little while later, Lisa spots Paco in the street with another woman. Paco comes home late more and more frequently, and this causes tension in the household. Katie reaches her breaking point and creates a scene. She expresses frustration that the baby cries all the time and that she doesn't have enough time to do everything. She complains that Paco doesn't help at all. He responds harshly at first, but eventually agrees to work night shifts and take care of their son during the day. Before going to bed, they reconcile and dream together that soon everything will be like it used to be. The next day, Katie goes to the factory, and Paco is sprawled on the couch with a bottle of beer. However, his moment of tranquility is short-lived, as Ricky begins to cry. His father heads to the kitchen to prepare a bottle of milk for the baby, feeds him, and changes his diaper a few hours later. Katie and Lisa return home to find Paco asleep with the baby in his arms. As the stepfather attempted to assist Lisa with her homework, a sense of unease lingered in the air. Katie carefully changed her son's diaper and, to her horror, discovered peculiar bruises on his tiny back. Instinctively, she summoned Paco, her voice trembling with accusation. With a mix of anger and hurt, she demanded an explanation, convinced that he had harmed their child. Paco's face twisted with disbelief and disgust. He vehemently denied any wrongdoing, his voice laced with indignation. The next morning, Katie still couldn't fall asleep. Her daughter enters the kitchen and asks if Ricky is going to die. Her mother scolds her for asking silly questions and rushes to attend to her crying son. As she undresses the baby, she notices a second bruise on Ricky's back. Shortly after, Paco returns from his night shift, and Katie tells him she wants to have a serious conversation. There are 2 bruises on the baby's back, and she asked Paco about what he did to the child. Paco asks if Katie truly believes he could harm their son. She firmly states that's exactly what she thinks. Paco stands up, grabs his jacket, throws his keys on the floor, and leaves the house. Now Lisa often finds herself taking care of her brother. One day, she gets distracted by a doll while her mother is away and loses sight of Ricky. When Katie returns home and asks her daughter to bring her brother to the living room, she realizes that the baby is not in his crib. What's even more unsettling is that the crib sheet is stained with blood and feathers. Before they even understand what's happening, Katie hears the baby crying. She and her daughter look under the crib, but realize the sound is coming from above, and mysteriously, Ricky is perched on top of the wardrobe. Mother and daughter begin coaxing him to come down and accidentally drop him to the ground in their negligence. Suddenly, they see a pair of functioning wings on his back. At first, the strange growths on Ricky's back sent shivers of fear through Katie and Lisa, but their unease proved short-lived. After giving the baby a bath and covering his crib with a sheet, they went to dinner. Determined, Katie informed her daughter that they wouldn't be taking Ricky to the doctor and forbade her from mentioning her brother at school before bedtime. Though Katie initially contemplated calling Paco, she eventually changed her mind. A week later, Ricky's wings had grown significantly, measuring almost 3 inches in length. Surprisingly, he slept better now and cried less. He even started fluttering above the sofa, though his confidence remained tentative. Day by day, his wings grew larger and longer, eventually becoming adorned with thick feathers. One day, Lisa returned from school and encountered Paco, who inquired about her mother and Ricky. Rather than answering, the little girl hurriedly caught a bus to avoid his questions. Meanwhile, Katie purchased a science book on bird wings and a lightweight helmet to craft a costume for Ricky at home. Together, mother and daughter dressed the baby in the outfit and let him take flight, but the experiment didn't end well. Shortly after, Katie discovered they had won 2,000 euros in the lottery they had been playing for years. Overjoyed, she took Lisa and Ricky to the supermarket to buy gifts. Unwittingly, Katie left Ricky unattended in the shopping cart for a moment. When they returned, they realized the boy had vanished. He had torn through his clothing and was already soaring near the ceiling, capturing everyone's attention. Katie desperately pleaded with Ricky to come back, but he paid no heed to their voices. The supermarket employees swiftly ordered everyone to evacuate, while security personnel embarked on a frantic search for the child. Ricky's mother speculated that he was drawn to the bright lights and implored the management to switch them off. Miraculously, the plan succeeded. Approximately 2 days later, Katie and Lisa found themselves at the hospital. Ricky's extraordinary peculiarities captivated a local doctor, who invited them into his office. He declared that the child should undergo a detailed examination and be kept under observation for a while. Katie vehemently objected, unwilling to let her son become a lab rat. The doctor persisted, insisting that such a unique child required special conditions for upbringing that Katie could not provide at home. Her indignation only grew stronger. Determined, Katie grabbed her son and headed home. Yet she was met with a throng of journalists awaiting her outside the hospital. She managed to snatch the doctor's card, and with great difficulty made her way back home. The next morning, Katie watched a news report on Ricky and the supermarket incident unfold on the television screen. Throughout the day, groups of journalists prowled her garden, desperately seeking exclusive information or capturing footage of the extraordinary child. The night was restless, and in the early morning hours, the doorbell rang. Katie instructed her daughter to keep a watchful eye on Ricky in the bedroom as she went to answer it. It was Paco. Having seen the news report on television, he demanded to know why Katie hadn't told him the truth about their son. She apologized and he grew weary of it. Paco expressed his desire to see his son, explaining that he had traveled to Paris to work part-time at a friend's restaurant, and that all this time, his mind had been fixated on one thing: returning home. Paco stepped into the children's room and beheld his son soaring through the air. His excitement was palpable, but Katie noticed the fear in the child's eyes. Ricky clumsily collided with furniture and exhibited behavior that deviated than usual. Paco swiftly reached out, attempting to calm him down. Concern etched across his face as he realized that the child was suffering and should not remain in such perilous conditions. He told Katie that they should get him out of here and see proper treatment, but Lisa interrupted him and told him that only she would decide what would happen. Lisa noticed bloodstains on Ricky's pillow and promptly called the doctor. The physician examined the injury and expressed that the current living environment is unsuitable for a child like Ricky. He further explained that Ricky's wings emerged from his shoulder blades, suggesting the possibility of a surgical operation akin to the separation of conjoined twins to remove them. Such an undertaking would undoubtedly require extensive care and attention post-surgery. That evening, Lisa attempted to sever her brother's wings using a scissor, but her stepfather startled her, causing her to cease her actions. After watching over his son, Paco made his way to the kitchen to speak with Katie. He voiced his concerns about the financial burden of caring for Ricky and suggested that Katie handle the interactions with the journalists. Uncertain, Katie questioned whether Paco had returned solely to profit from their son. In response, Paco implored Katie to trust him and reminded her of the reasons behind his initial departure. Later, when the family left the house, a horde of reporters were waiting for them. The journalists rejoiced at the opportunity to capture the miraculous child from every angle, even while he flew. With a specially designed rope, the young parents allowed their son to soar, but suddenly the rope slipped away from Katie. A horde of journalists descended on them. Frantically, the parents rushed after Ricky, sprinting towards the lake. However, as Ricky disappeared on the horizon, it became painfully clear that he wouldn't be returning. The reporters, now sobbing bitterly, began to disperse. Hours passed, filled with futile search efforts around the lake as people desperately looked for any sign of Ricky. His family remained in the spot where they last saw him, their hearts heavy with sorrow. Yet their search yielded no results. In the following days, Paco and Lisa plastered missing child posters all over town. Meanwhile, Katie remained bedridden, refusing to face the world and retreating deeper into her grief. Early on a Sunday morning, Katie rose from her bed, drew open the curtains, and let the daylight flood in. Stirred by the morning light, Paco woke and asked about her intentions. She told him that she was going for a walk by the lakeside. Paco tries to dissuade her from going and tells her that Ricky is gone forever and there is no chance of finding him. Despite her lover's arguments, Katie ventured out of the house and made her way to the dreaded lake. Removing her shoes, she stepped into the water, seemingly determined to bid farewell to life. However, in that somber moment, a familiar voice reached her ears. Katie lifted her head, her eyes widening as she saw her son Ricky. She followed him along the edge of the lake, taken aback by how much he had grown. Katie confessed that she had intentionally let go of the rope, but not because she wanted to rid herself of him. Ricky smiled in response to his mother's admission, but soon he took flight once again, soaring away from her. Thankfully, Katie returned home. Embracing Paco and Lisa, she expressed her love for them with all her heart. Several months passed, and they continued living together as a family. Lisa is now accompanied to school by her stepfather. While Katie remains at home, they are expecting a new baby and seems to have left the past behind entirely. Here we come to the end of the movie. What do you think French director François Ozon intended to convey with this tale of the bird child? Share your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more fantastic film recaps.